Good morning, everyone, and welcome to week 2, session 11, which is actually day 6 and first session of day 6. Last week has been really exciting. We learned a lot on web development. We started as a novice. We didn't know anything about web development on day 1. And you might have known it, but there was no assumption that you know anything about web development, what is website, etc. And in just 5 days' time, we were able to create our own web pages, and that's really exciting. So now you can think of yourself as a web developer because you are capable of creating web pages. You can create any kind of web page because you know what HTML is. You can create any styling or any type of visualization in the web page because you know CSS, right? So HTML and CSS is excellent for creating pages which is showing content, and it's pretty much capable of doing the work for 80% of your requirements. Most of the websites are static in their content. So to create a static content website, you just need these two things, HTML and CSS, and that we have learned. But there are many websites where a lot of interactions will be needed, some changes will be required, some input validation will be done. The content will come actually on the real-time basis. Content is not fixed. So that means it is very, very dynamic. To get our website ready for dynamic situations, we will have to also learn one more technology that is called JavaScript. So we will learn that this week. We will also learn to create nice reusable style sheets or CSS definitions. What we have been doing is defining styles for each of the HTML elements separately. This week, we will make it more elegant by defining it as reusable classes, and then depending on the structure of the HTML, we can have conditional styles. And that is what we are going to learn today itself. What I just told you is there will be some websites where you will require users' input. So in this week, we will learn about dealing with user inputs or input forms. Inputs are the most difficult part in any application, not just web applications, because users can pretty much enter anything, anywhere, but most of the time you will have some limitations. Suppose you are expecting someone to enter a date, a birth date, for example. You will not expect user to enter something which is actually in the format of email address there, right? Date has a format. It should have 3 components at least: date, month, year. So you will want the user to enter something in that format. But what if user has entered simply just the date part? Similarly, if you want someone to enter the email address, that is a defined pattern. Somebody who has not entered it like that. So there are always chance of mistakes, and there are always chances of manipulation. So data that you are taking in from user has to be filtered, checked, cleaned up before it is accepted, because it can lead to unforeseen situations too, including the damage of your server, damage of the entire application, damage of other users. So it's very critical, and we will learn how to validate the inputs before we accept the inputs. That is what we will learn in this week. Then we will get a little deeper in JavaScript part to see if the data that we are trying to display, if that is coming from some other source, or if it is stored separately from this the layout, how can we mix them all together at runtime? That is another good and important area for us. And it will also set a stage for creating, or rather requiring, the creation of more complex web component or web UI components. HTML is giving us a lot of features out of the box, but as we will grow our knowledge, as we will hit new user domains or use cases or a business domain that we want to serve, we will realize the requirement of more complex reusable components or web components or new visuals or now new widgets. So we will not be able to cover that in detail here because that requires more serious learning of some of the technologies that are out in the market. We will not create our own technology there, but it will set a path. It will set a requirement basically for further learning. And then we will do a complete recap. So that is how we will progress in this week. We will focus on creating reusable CSS, starting with JS or JavaScript, then getting a little deeper in JavaScript by understanding the document object model concept, and then we will get into form validations or dealing with forms and validations of data that is inputted by user. Then we will do some more advanced styling, something which is good for different screen sizes, which is called responsive web design. We'll learn about that. Then we will learn how to do some animations, etc. That will be quite fun. How can we do animation using styles in our web pages? Animations, transitions, etc., etc. And finally, as I said, it will set a requirement for advanced learning on how to create reusable components. And one more thing is dynamically feeding the content into the web page, right? So I have a data separately stored, and then I mixed it with the visualization template that I create. So we can create a template, we can feed the data dynamically so that my web page is completely reusable, and that is where it will become truly dynamic. Okay, so let's begin our journey for this week. And today we are into the 11th session. So what we have done so far is excellent, nice. We are able to create web pages with a lot of styling, a lot of a default visualization can be overridden by applying our own styles like colors, background color, font, and various other styles that we have learned so far. But one, we can say demerit, but it is not a demerit because it was good so far, it has worked for us. But the demerit that I'm trying to highlight here is that we have been defining styles uniquely and very locally for each and every element. But we are good at defining the styles. At least we have the control of properties and their values and how to use it. What we are going to do today is to learn a way to make it reusable across multiple elements, so that I define it once and I use it again and again. And advantages of that, there are many. We'll talk about that. So let's take a look at the way we define things. You're aware of these declarations. The declarations are what? Is style declarations. Key value pairs, right? So we have a property, and then we have a value to that. So here you have a property, for example, color and its property, and then semicolon, another property and their value. So we actually create what? We create multiple key value pairs, and those are separated by semicolon. And what we were doing, we were putting these key value pairs as the value of a HTML property called style. Good. Now what we can do is we can define these as a separate bunch. So we will do what? We will create a key value pairs the same way that we were doing earlier, but we will now put up inside a pair of curly braces. You see these curly braces? So you can define a block of key value pairs, and you can give that block a name, and that name has to be put up before the block. Okay, at the beginning of the block, you put up a name. Now that name is quite magical because your HTML browser, the browser is what? The application which interprets the entire content and then apply the visualizations appropriately and apply the styles appropriately. So browser will interpret the name that is given before a block of style properties differently in different situations. And what are those? That is what we are going to learn today, and we will see how it gets applied to. So that name is formally called selector. What actually happens with the selector? So it is the name has to be given, and there is a little convention that we'll have to follow. It's not convention only, it is rule also. So how to name a selector or how to name a block of style property, there are certain rules because that is the rule that will be followed by the browser when it is interpreting the meaning of your block and where to apply that block. That's the most important part. So you define your property blocks at one place, you give it a name, and using that name and the pattern used in that name will be the key, the most important thing for getting those styles applied on one or the other piece of your page. And pieces of your page are what? HTML tags, HTML elements, or portions of HTML. So this is how, based on the selectors, the browser tries and finds all matching HTML elements and then starts applying the definitions that you have put up against that selector. So you put a lot of declarations in the selector's body, and then first thing what browser does, tries and finds the matches for each selector in a sequence, and then whenever it finds a match, wherever it finds a match, it will apply the properties that you have defined. So it's a pretty simple thing to understand, but it is on us to define the selectors appropriately, because sometimes if we make a mess of things, you may see an unprecedented visualization. You did not expect that to happen, but it has happened. It happens because of wrongly defining the selectors. And that is what we learned today. So we will not make any unexpected definitions. Okay. So this is the syntax part of style and its declaration. So what it contains, as we discussed, declaration blocks contain one or more declarations separated by semicolon. Nothing new, we have been using this. And each declaration is made up of a key and a value. Key is the style property and value is one of the many possible values that we know of. Each declaration includes a CSS property, name, and a value separated by a column. Fine. Then a CSS declaration always ends with a semicolon, and declaration blocks are surrounded by curly braces. So these are the conventions that you must remember, because sometimes if it is not done appropriately, your page will misbehave completely. So you have to be very careful. And finally, the selector points to the HTML element you want to style. And selector is what? A name given to the block of declaration that you have put up in your page. Fine. So selector points to the HTML element. It can be one or it can be many, depends where you want to apply this set of style. So a CSS rule set consists of selector and a declaration block, right? So this whole thing is called a rule set. So what we are going to do is we will be defining various rule sets. So it will have a name and a body or declaration block, and then that will decide what type of styles will be applied where. Okay, let's take some examples by defining such styles and see what happens. So we'll start with a simple thing, simple elements based on name. So simple selectors. And what is that? Simple selectors. It is a rule set where the name of the element or a class or ID's value. ID is a property, so value of ID. And you remember ID is property of each HTML element, which is expected to have a unique value. Value should be unique across the entire set of HTML elements. So we can define styles or rule sets which is based on the name of the element or a property called class or a property called ID. Okay, and if we are defining such rule sets, we are calling it simple selectors because it's the simplest form of defining a selector. So how do we do that? Let's take it by first example is by tag name. So I have a definition to make where the color should be red and text alignment should be centered, right? These are two properties that we have used quite often, color and text align. So I define a bunch, a block, and how do I do that? By putting it inside a pair of curly braces. And while naming the rule set, I said P. Now you know P is a known HTML element, right? It's the name of one of the HTML tags that you have been using, P for paragraph. So if you say P in a space and then in a pair of curly braces, couple of definitions or more, you can have one or many definitions, fine. If you have done this, and this is what you have put up in your HTML page, and then if you have something like this present in the page, say a paragraph, content could be anything. I used hello world here. What will happen is something like this. So you have this tag and you have another tag. So you can have multiple P's, of course, and you can have other things too. But focus here is on P because you have defined a rule set which is supposedly going to work on paragraph. And if you have defined it properly, following the convention, Priyanka said she's not able to see anything. Is it a problem with others too? No one is able to see? Others, are you able to see? Can you please say yes? We can see now. So Priyanka, I think you will have to re-log in because the screen is shared. Yeah, Jay is also saying he can see. Yeah, so you can reconnect. All right. So back to the discussion. So if this works properly, and this will work properly if there is no deviation in the definition or syntax. That is very important. As a semicolon missing, a colon missing, and things will not work. So you have to be very careful in typing. And if everything works well, the page or the content of the page will appear something like this. So you can notice that the hello world is a paragraph, fine, but it is red in color and it is center aligned. Similarly, the second paragraph is also in red color and center aligned. But remember, you have not specified the styles here on the P tag itself. That's our traditional approach that we have been following so far. So P, then style equal to color red, text align center, and then again repeat the same here. We are not doing that. what we did is we have defined a rule set separately, and then that automatically gets applied on all P's because the definition has been tagged as P, right? P tag. So it works this way. Let's see it in a working example. I will open the page and I'll see if I have the example written. Yep, I have this example written. And let me increase the font size so that it is always visible. Okay, fine. I hope this is visible. So this is how I have defined. One new thing that you will now notice is these definitions, these rule sets are put up in a new type of tag called style tag. So we are getting introduced to another HTML tag, which is named as style, but the purpose of this is to store multiple rule sets or style rule sets. It will hold onto multiple style definitions, and then when the browser loads this page, style property or style tag will be evaluated, and then depending on the selectors, the styles will get applied on various elements. Fine. So this is another thing. Where will you do the definition? Otherwise, it will, if you remove the style, it will appear like a regular text. But it is not a regular text. It has to be treated separately. And to do that, you have to wrap it inside the style tag. Fine. So whenever you have to define a new rule set, style rule set, put up inside style tag. Now you can have multiple style tags in a page, but it is always advisable to have just one style tag, and then all styles that you are writing should be put up inside the same style tag. It is not necessary that each rule set should have been placed in its own style tag. No, not needed. However, you are free to put up more than one style tags. All right, so let us see how it appears for now. So as expected, when I loaded this page, this is how it is appearing. Now I will change the color, for example, from red to green, and then come back to the page, and I just refresh this page. You will notice that both paragraphs will change the color. Yes, it worked. And if I add another property, say background color, say light gray, spelling I don't G-R-E-Y or G-R-A-Y. I hope it is G-R-A-Y. Okay. Yes. So you see, whatever changes I am making in the rule, it gets applied automatically to all of the matching HTML elements. And that matching is the most useful part of defining styles as rule set. It's a block of styles with a selector, and then that selector is being matched with the HTML content. And this is the simplest selector, which is based on the tag name. Suppose I change this to a tag, right? I said A should be having these styles. Now, if I do this and I refresh the page, you will notice that these styles will go away from the P, because now this has to match with A and anchor tags only, right? So if I now add anchor tag, I can have anything in href, a link. Fine. Now what we will see is this style is applied to A but not P. Fine. And if I change it back to P, then we will notice that these styles are not applied to A but P. Correct. Now what we can do is I can define a style which is applicable to more than one type of tags. So if I say P and A like this, comma separated list of tags, I can give a the rule set multiple names or multiple selectors like this. I say P, comma, A. Then what happens? It gets applied on each of them. So it got applied on P tags, it got applied on A tag. Fine. So I can define a rule set and give it multiple names at the same time by separating the names using comma. Okay. So it is not necessary to re-copy. So I did not have to basically do this. It is as good as this. It is as good as this. But I can reuse it to the greatest extent. If everything is common, I can just put a comma separated list of names for the rule set and it works for me. So that's so fantastic. So I can control the definitions, or I can limit it to the minimum, and then I can use it in many places. Cool. So this is the simplest style definition in the term of rules that we can do by tag name. Now next thing is by class. Now class is an interesting thing. Let's take a look at the example and then we'll come back and understand it more. So it is easier to understand it using examples. So I say I defined two elements, H1 element and P element, and I want to do what? I want to do the same thing that I did earlier, like center aligned and red colored. But what is happening here is one tag is of type H1, another is of type P. So one option that I have is, okay, I define a rule set and I say H1 comma P, possible, but it has a side effect. So if I have a P where I want this, but I have another P where I don't want this, then what? So I have a page which has H1 like this, P, and another P, two P's and one H1. But I want this style to be applied on only one P and not the other P. So I cannot use the tag name, because tag name will do what? It will apply on all of the matching tags if the definition is by tag name. So I need an alternative way. And on the other side, I just not want to use it on one type of tag. I want to use it on multiple type of tags. So I can say, well, if it is to be applied on all tags of this type or this name, well, simple, I use the tag name in the definition. But if I don't want to, then what? So in that case, what I will do, I will prefix the name. I can use any name in that case. Now, that's the freedom that I get. I don't have to limit it to H1, H2, H3P, div, span, etc. that we have used so far. I can use XYZ, any name, but if I prefix it with dot, a single dot character, immediately, no spaces between dot and the name. Name can be containing only special characters like hyphen or underscore. It should not be containing any space. So dot and then the name without spaces makes this definition a class definition. So what I'm defining here is a class of CSS. Now with this, I can use this class in any tag, irrespective of what name of the tag is. So if it is H1 or P or span or div or whatever. But if I specify this name without dot, so that is something that you will have to understand very carefully. When you are defining, you have to put a dot prefix. But when you are using the class definition, you don't have to put that dot. So how do you put it? You say class equal to. So class is very similar to style property, and which is present on all visualizable HTML element. So H1 has a class property, H1 has also style property, P has a class property, P has a style property. So in class property, what you do, you say this name of the class, and name is only the portion after dot. So this name of the class should get applied on this tag. What is magical is you can use multiple class names too, and all of them will get applied. We will see that example quickly. So if I have this particular situation, what will happen? H1 will get this style, P will get this style, but this P will not get this style because there is no style which is only matching with the P tag, and matches are happening based on the class property and the values inside the class property. So in this case, the visualization will appear a little different. Now what I'm going to do, as I said, I can have multiple such class definitions like this. And if I have multiple such class definitions, and then I have an example like this, I said, well, H1 should have red center style, and it should also have background gray. But P should have only red center, and this P should have nothing. So if I define something like this, where I can say H1 has multiple classes, and how do we do that? By separating the names by simple space. So this space this. So it will pick the styles, this style and this style and whatever style classes that we have specified. And if that's the situation, it will appear something like this. And interestingly, what I can do is I can also use style property along with class property. So if you did not notice, I'll come back. So here something appears magically. Okay, right? So I can say red center, BG gray, and then something more. So default color is red because this red center will apply red color, fine. But I still want to change it. So I have another handle. So much capability is coming through styling. So the last thing that I have is style property that we have been using, and here I can say this property has this value. So the application of style happens in certain order. The first thing is the default of the browser. Then if you have classes specified, that will get applied. If you have tag specific definitions, that will get applied. And then finally, if you have something defined in the style, that will get applied. And because it is applied in certain sequence, first the browser default, then your custom style definitions using the class name and other rule set based styling, and then finally the inbuilt or inline styling. This style property is called inline styling. So that's the third level, and whichever comes the last remains applicable. So because it is like painting, one paint and then you do another paint and then you another paint. So the last color that you use to paint will remain visible. So it will not, suppose you created a large canvas and then you painted the full canvas with say a background color brown. Okay, and then you created few grids or few boxes and then you painted those boxes into say yellow. So larger canvas is brown while small boxes are now what? Yellow. And then inside those boxes you created lines and those lines are using red. So that red appears as line. But behind the red you had used the yellow color, and behind that yellow color you had used the brown color. So brown is not appearing for the portion where yellow was applied, but brown was still there behind it. So styling works like this. If you have over applied something, that remains applicable, and then you applied again something new, that remains. So whichever value gets loaded or applied at the last remains effective. So you can keep rewriting the style, and sometimes it is going to create a mess too. So you have to be very careful because the way things are defined, and in the order things are defined or the styles are defined makes a lot of difference. Okay, so when the styles will be loaded, it will be loaded in certain order, and then as soon as it is loaded, it gets applied on various matching selector. So the last thing is what? The inline style property. So what will happen here now is H1 will get the red center, which will make the color red and text align center. Then it will get BG gray because that is what is applied next, which is background color gray. So it will set the background color to gray, and then style will get applied, and style is saying color white. So far the color has already been changed from default black to red. The default color is of course black. Then it was changed to color red, and now what is happening? It is saying color white. So H1 will appear very different, and it appears something like this. So the default color of hello world would have been black, which was changed to first red and then to white. For p tag, the first p tag, the default color would have been black, but it was changed to red and nothing after that, so it remains red. The last p tag, which had a default color black and it did not get any overriding color, so it remains black. And this is the interesting and most important part of CSS, which is called cascading effect. And that is where the name came, cascading style sheet. It cascades, it falls through one after that one, another one, and it follows the sequence. So you have a definition and you created another definition purposely or accidentally, you reuse the name. So it basically does what? It creates a union of definitions. Union, if you know mathematics, set theory, you know what union is. Union will do what? It will take the common things and just keep one copy of that. But in this case, union behaves little differently. If you have the same property present in both definitions, so but different values, that is how it is not unique. But it will not keep both. Say one definition says color red, another definition says color white. Will it take both? No, it will take the last definition. So if some value, some property is being redefined, the last definition is retained. So that is very interesting and very useful behavior of styling, and that is what you will see quite often. So if it is not managed well, it may give you unpredictable results too. So you have to be very careful. Understand this hierarchy. The first preference is the browser's default. Second preference is the selectors matching with the element, and third preference is to the style, and in the reverse order. When I say preference, that does not mean browser's default will be given the importance. No, that is the first application. So I should not say preference, but the order of application. First application from browser, second application from the matching selectors, and third application will be from the inline style definitions. So whichever comes the last remains effective. Okay, let's see it working quickly. So I have the same example and it works like this. So you can see the source code behind this. Pretty simple. So I have two style rule sets defined, and then this is how it has been used, and then color white was also applied as an inline style. So this is called inline definition of style. Inline means inside the elements definition, and this is not inline, this is called in file, or technically it is called internal. That is how we can differentiate. This is inline definition and this is internal definition. Now, will there be something like external? Yes, we will learn about that in this session or next session. Okay, so there are three ways of defining styles: inline, internal, and this is internal, and there will be external. All right, so let's move forward. So in the simple selectors, we have so far learnt about tag based or tag name based and class based. Difference between tag name based and class name based is tag name will be one of the known HTML tags. No prefix, just the tag name. And if you have to apply it on multiple, you can always use comma separated list of tag names. But class name could be anything of your choice following the convention, but it must be preceded by a dot. Cool. The next thing is actually mixing them all. Can we have a situation where I have a tag selector, class selector, and one more thing that is left out so far is the ID selector. How we define the ID selector, let's understand that and then try to mix them all. Suppose a page or a HTML element has an ID property. So I said h1 ID is equal to page title. Good. And then have a style. So suppose this is the page that I have. And now I want to define a rule set which is applicable to any element which has an ID page title. So how do I do that? Name of the ID, of course, and preceded by a hash sign. Remember, dot before the name matches the class property. Hash before the name matches the ID property. And as you know, ID has to be a single value. So you cannot have multiple values in the ID, no commas, no space separation, etc. So naming convention has to be followed. So hash before a definition indicates it's a ID properties value match. It's the ID selector. And definition, of course, remains the same. So here in this side, if you notice, I have a rule set which is ID property or ID selector. This one is the tag name selector, and this one is a class selector, because you can notice there is a dot before deleted, and each of them are doing something. Now on this side I have a page which has an element with ID, and that ID is matching here. So certainly this style set will be applied on this h1 tag because the ID matches with this definition. Then I have a p tag which has no ID, no style, no class, but I have a p matching definition here, a rule set with a tag name p. So this definition gets applied here. Now here I have another p which has what? A style, inline style. So of course this one will get applied because p tag matches with this selector, but additionally the inline style will also get applied at the last. That is the last application. Then inside this p I have a span tag which has a class deleted. What does that mean? This class definition deleted should match with any of the class definitions, and I have it here. So deleted, or whatever property value or declarations that have been defined here, will get applied to this span, only this portion, because it has to get applied on the span, right? So this is how the selectors will match with the content in the HTML page. Okay, and how will the page appear now? Like this. So hello world is a h1 tag, so font etc is by default, but color has been set to white because this ID selector matches. So color becomes white, text line becomes center, background color becomes gray. Fine. This p tag gets the background color. This p tag also gets the background color. So this and this both have the same background color, which is light gray. This one is gray, so you can see the difference. And then only this portion of the span which says not affected gets this text decoration, and text decoration is line through, because here the deleted class matched with this the deleted class definition, and that is getting this line through style applied. Correct? So this is how we can have a mix. And additionally, you can have comma separated definitions too. So here, suppose you think this is nice background, and I say, well, this should be applied to page title, ID, as well as everything which is say H1 to H6 by default. That is also possible. You can say comma this, comma this. So any rule set can have multiple names using a comma separated list of names, and it can be any of the three: tag name, class, or ID. And you can have a mixture of all in the definition itself. So it is quite useful and quite reusable. Simple selectors are the most prevalent selector that you will see in internal definitions or even external definitions. Whenever you are defining a rule set, you will see plenty of simple selectors. Simple selector works on three things that we have discussed so far: tag name, class name, and ID of the element. Class name is what? The value that you specify in class property of any HTML element. You can have multiple values put up inside the class, and each of those will match with one or the other style or class definition, and that gets applied. ID has to be a unique value, and that should match with the style that you have defined for that ID. ID, how do you differentiate between a tag selector and a ID selector and a class selector? Tag selector will have the name of the tag. Class selector will have a dot before the name, and ID selector will have a hash before the name, right? So this is how you define the simple selector. And all of these definitions must be put up inside a style element in the HTML page, style element. Otherwise, all of these things will be treated like a plain text. So that is very important for us to remember. All style rule sets must be put up inside a style tag or style element. Okay? Any questions so far? Anything which is unclear? This is very, very important. Jay, you mentioned you can't hear. Are you able to hear now?
I can hear.
Okay, good. All right. So this is the most basic but very important part of styling that gives you a whole lot of control and whole lot of reusability. You can see now that my HTML elements are so clean. Otherwise, I had to define all of these styles inline, and the style properties value will become too long. That was really clumsy. So now we can define them separately and then just put up a reference in the element, and it works the same way it would have worked if I had put everything in the style. Advantage is I am able to reuse the same definition in multiple places. Priyanka, you are asking, explain again inline. So whatever we are defining, whatever style that we are defining as a style property of an element, that is called inline definition or inline styling. So something like this is inline styling. So I said P style color green. Did you notice that for P, which is the default color is black. Why black? Because the browser's default color for the text is black. So this P remains black, or the text here remains black. But here I said color green, and this is an inline styling, so it made the text appear in green color. The default was black, but it is overwritten or overridden by the next level of styling, which is the inline styling. Because there was no other internal style which is overriding the color of P, that was skipped. So default color or default style comes from the browser first, and that is overwritten by the internal styles or external styles, depends in whatever order, basically the selector based style. So first level is the browser default, second level is selector based, and third level is inline styling, which is defined in the style property. And the whichever comes the last remains applicable. And this is actually called the cascading effect. And that is why the name cascading style sheet. Okay. This is the most basic and most important part of styling in terms of its grammar or syntax, the rules. Fine? Clear, Priyanka? I hope yes. Okay, cool. Now, let's take a look at the types of selector. We have seen one type of selector, and in that also basically three. So tag name based, class based, and ID based. So we have grouped them together and said it is a simple selector. Fine. Do we have other types of selectors? So simple selectors we have known, which are elements based on name, ID, and class. It selects the elements based on name, ID, or class. Fine, simple selector. Then we have a combinator selector. Now, combinator selector is the next most used type of style definition. And what happens here is elements are selected on the basis of specific relationship between them. It is mostly based on the relationship between two elements. So an element will be selected if there is some relationship with some other element. Say, for example, this style should get applied to an element if it is nested inside another element. Now, another element can have its own conditions. Say, I say, well, apply this style on p tags provided it is inside a div tag. If the p is outside a div, there is no parent div, then do not apply this selector. So I say div space p, and then the definition, which is interpreted like this. Well, it has to be applied on p's which are inside a div. Now, in the it's like parent-child relationship. So when combinators are applied, it can be applied on a parent-child relationship matches. When the parent-child relationship matches, fine. But parent-child could be immediate parent or multi-level, say second generation or third generation, grandparent or grandchild, something like that. And remember, it will be downward from parent to child. You cannot say, well, apply this style on a parent which has this child. No, that is still not possible, because the application starts from parent and then inherited into child and into next level and like that, right? So it is always top down, or from root to branch and then to branch to another branch, like that. It's a tree structure. So you cannot specify a relationship which goes from bottom to top or from a leaf to no root. No, it will always be from root to leaf. So relationships are always from parent to child. So this child relation combinator selector works on child provided there is a parent. That is one type of relationship. The other type of relationship will be brothers and sisters, which is called sibling relationship. So you are at the same level. So you say, I am here and I'm an immediate sibling. I'm next to each other immediately. Or I am a sibling, but like a cousin. Okay, so there will be a few more things in the middle. But I am at the same level. I am a branch and I am at the same level as some other branch. So combinator selectors can be applied in parent-child relationships or sibling relationships. We will get into the details We will see a lot of examples on combinator selector. So that's second type of selector, which is not identifying an element directly, but on the basis of its presence with respect to other elements. So it is controlled by other elements' presence. Okay. Third type is attribute selectors. So we said, okay, this tag or this class or this ID, fine. And then it matches and it said, but I said, no, not just this, but you also look for a particular attribute of that element. Say I'm saying, well, you have a anchor tag, and then anchor you have been using properties, or in image img tag we have been using properties. In anchor we have used href and what, any other property, say target. In img we have used to src and alt, alternate text. Yeah. So if I'm saying, well, if this image has an alternate text, then only apply this style, otherwise don't apply. Or you say, if this image has a src property value specified, a src attribute is specified, and its value is this. Not all images which has src, because src is a mandatory property. So we'll say, well, IMG will always have SRC. What's the big deal? Anchor will always have href. What is the big deal? But I say no. For this particular value of that href, or for this particular value of that SRC, if the match goes to that level, then only apply this style, otherwise don't apply. So you can specify selectors for the attributes presence or attributes value match. Okay, so if we are defining selectors like that, which is based on tag name, id, class, anything, and then attribute, and we can make it complicated by using combinator tags with attribute tags. So we can be very deeply controlled. We can define very specific styles too, where we say, well, this combinator and this property on that matching element, and it can be mixed also. So I say a div which has a width property, or something like that. Say I have a table tag, and table should have a width property or a border property, and then inside that I have a tr tag and then td tag. So I say table which has a width equal to 0, and then TDs of that should have this. I can be very specific like that. We'll see examples as we progress for each of the situation. Then third thing is pseudo class, and fourth one is pseudo element. Now pseudo element and pseudo class, we have taken a glimpse of that earlier, but we did not use it because I was waiting for this class or this session. Pseudo elements are the elements which are basically portions or parts of a given element, while pseudo class is based on certain state or situation of an element. And we saw an example of state, say when you are hovering the mouse over the element, or you have clicked, something like that, or something has been selected. So that is basically the current state of an element. And you can define selectors which are applicable only if the element is in certain state, and there is a way to do that. Then on the other side, pseudo elements, you will say, well, elements and it's a portion or a part of the element should have this particular style applied. Okay, we'll see all of these with examples and understand that in our next session, uh, starting with the combinator. It's 10 o'clock and I will stop this session, but we will continue from here in our next session today. Okay, and this will be very, very useful for us, because this is how we will be able to define styles which are quite specific as well as reusable. Okay, any question before we end this session and we take a break of 5 minutes? What tag do we use for bullets and numbering? Bullets, so I think what you are asking, Jay, is about the listings. And there are two ways, as you know, two ways of listing. If you have an unordered list where you said bullets, the tag for that is UL, unordered list. And for elements, you will always use LI tags. So UL will have multiple LIs, and each LI will be represented as bullets. And if you want a numbered listing, then it is called ordered list. An ordered list tag is OL. OL means ordered list. So OL will have again LIs, multiple LIs. Yes. OL will have LIs, and in this case LIs will be numbered. So number or ABCD or what you specify depends on a property called type that you will specify along with OL. So OL can have a type attribute or type property where you say 1, that means numbered, say A, capital letter, so it will be in capital ABCD. If you say small letter A, it will be small letter ABCD, like that. Okay, all right. Any other questions? All right, let's take a break and we'll come back at 10:10, right? We'll come back at 10:10. Thank you so much.